Spoilers for the Eternals are ahead. Welcome back to Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy. Imperious Rex! That's Namor's war cry, and it's probably what he's shouting right now at the top of his lungs after what went down in the Eternals. A celestial just rose from the ocean, piercing Earth's surface. That must have resulted in devastation all around the world, especially everything under the sea, and that is where Atlantis is located.
Imperious Rex!
Namor is expected to be the villain in Wakanda Forever, and we might see Atlantis going to war with Wakanda. And after the Eternals, I have a good idea how this conflict will begin. On top of that, Tiamat's existence gives us answers to what happened to Atlantis, and why the ancient kingdom sank under the ocean. But before all that, we have to talk about one of the most complicated anti-heroes in all of comics, Namor, and why Wakanda Forever is the perfect movie to introduce him into the MCU.
I care not for the affairs of others, neither human nor inhuman. Your people are unwelcome intruders. I suggest you take this opportunity to remove yourselves from my territory, while you still have the chance.
So there are rumors that Tenoch Huerta from Narcos Mexico is the MCU's Namor, and that he will be the villain of Wakanda Forever. And while there's nothing official yet, it's probably all but confirmed. Namor is a fascinating character. He's an anti-hero. At times, he's a borderline villain. For him, it's Atlantis first, the rest of the world second. Except for Sue Storm, am I right? He's volatile and hot-headed, so he might help you, but at the same time, he might also kill you. Namor has a long and rich history in the comics. He's been around longer than most superheroes. The fans know that Namor is amazing, and for those who don't, here's how I'll explain him. He's not like Aquaman, especially not the Jason Momoa version. I guess the best way to explain Namor is this. He's basically what if Black Adam was Greta Thunberg.
How dare you! How dare you!
So Namor has an uphill battle in the eyes of fans, because it's inevitable that he will be compared to Aquaman.
I told you, I'm not Aquaman. I am the Submariner.
Wow, a real superhero.
I have little wings on my feet!
Yeah, and it's over.
But that might not be such a bad thing. With the right direction, Namor could actually be a far more interesting character than Arthur, especially because of the direction that Warner Brothers went with their Aquaman. Not that there's anything wrong with Aquabro. Momoa did great work and his personality fit perfectly for the tone of the movie. It's just that Aquaman has a very different personality in the comics. But things worked out well for Aquaman since it's the most successful DC movie ever. But as much as I like Aquabro, I much prefer a complicated anti-hero like Namor. And with such a dense personality, Namor could easily become one of the most iconic characters in the MCU. We have many heroes, but you can really count the anti-heroes on one hand, and we always love them. Now that's the TLDR version of Namor. I could talk about his comic escapades all day, but for this video, let's focus on how it will play out in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And yes, I will be using Aquaman footage from time to time while talking about Namor, and I hope that's not too insulting. But there's barely any footage of Namor, and to keep this whole video visually interesting, I don't want to use just still frames.
Good for you, dude.
And so let's dive into the fictional history of the Marvel world and see how Namor and Atlantis connect to all of this. At some point in ancient history, Ereshkigal chose Earth to be the host planet for Tiamat. Now it's unclear when that meteor crashed into Earth. I assume it happened about 1 million years ago, because every 1,000,000 years a new celestial must be born. But Tiamat's seed might have arrived only a few thousand years ago. So the tsunami that the impact unleashed might have been what sank Atlantis. But in case it wasn't, I have another idea. Also, I don't think it was the same meteor that hit Wakanda. That one definitely hit Earth millions of years ago.
Millions of years ago, a meteorite made of vibranium struck the continent of Africa.
In the comics, Atlantis emerged about 10,000 years ago, and that's probably what's going to happen in the MCU, a few thousand years give or take. Before the kingdom sank, it was the center of the world. Atlantis was an empire, a utopia, a place of commerce and trade. It birthed the most advanced civilization on the planet. But you know how the story of Atlantis goes. It's the same in the myth as it is in DC and Marvel. The city sank and its people adapted to living underwater.
Under the sea. Under the sea.
So there are a couple possibilities for why Atlantis went down under. The first and most likely one is Tiamat. So the emergence in the Eternals signified the birth of Tiamat, and it meant destructive earthquakes all around the world. That explains the earthquake Okoye spoke about in Endgame.
'Twas a mild subduction under the African plate.
Something we were all sure was connected to Atlantis until now. Our world's history is filled with countless cataclysmic earthquakes, volcanoes erupting, massive tsunamis swallowing whole lands. What if many of these events happened because of Tiamat? The Celestial's body grew in Earth's core over millions of years, and as he got bigger, he needed more space for his giant body. That surely sent destructive ripples across the planet, sort of like baby kicks in a mother's womb. Only these kicks shake the whole planet. So thousands of years ago, one of these baby kicks happened, causing a massive earthquake. That's the great cataclysm that sank Atlantis. Thematically, this makes the most sense. Tiamat is the cause for Atlantis going under the sea, and now the Celestial is also the reason why Atlantis is revealed to the world.
It's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
But Atlantis' fall might not have been an act of God, but a deliberate act of a cosmic god. Atlantis was the most advanced civilization on Earth, leaps and bounds beyond anything that was possible at the time. This technological advancement threatened Arisham's timeline for Earth. Because it wasn't just Atlantis, civilizations influenced each other, so the more advanced Atlantis got, so did the others, either by trade or wars. Humanity was never meant to evolve so rapidly. They only existed to reproduce and grow their population so that Tiamat will feed on their life's energy and grow bigger. So the Celestials balanced the scales. They engineered the catastrophe that sank Atlantis.
When the Earth starts to settle, God throws a stone at it. And believe me, he's winding up.
So basically, the Celestials, being gods, punished Atlantis with a flood. So a combination of these two will serve as a good explanation for Atlantis' fall. We only saw Tiamat's golden noggin and fingers, but those are attached to the rest of his body, all of it piercing Earth's crust all the way down to the core. I just hope Tiamat was coming out head first, otherwise his toes might be poking out of Florida. But when something that massive comes out of the core, that just messes with the world. Tiamat rose in the Indian Ocean, but because of how tectonic plates work, these events must have messed things up under the ocean, causing devastating earthquakes and tsunamis that reached the Atlantic Ocean. And Atlantis felt the worst of it because it sits right on Earth's surface. So I'm pretty sure that anyone who's standing next to the ocean right now might be hearing thunderous screams that sound like
Imperious Rex!
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Namor was not happy about any of this. In the comics, Atlantis is located somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, and that seems to be the case in the MCU as well. Atlantis was teased way back in Iron Man 2. On S.H.I.E.L.D.'s map, we can see two important marked points. The one in Africa is Wakanda, and the one in the Atlantic is probably Atlantis. Not sure how S.H.I.E.L.D. knew about a secret underwater kingdom, but I chuck it up to it being the early days of Marvel Studios, where they shoved Easter eggs into everything like that fake Infinity Gauntlet.
Fake.
Now, the Atlantic Ocean is a logical location for Atlantis. It's sort of the center of the world, reflecting how Atlantis used to be the center of the world in ancient times. The other option is that Atlantis is actually located in the Indian Ocean, bringing it closer to Ground Zero, where Tiamat was rising. But honestly, it doesn't really matter. Atlantis might as well be in the Pacific simply because it's the biggest ocean on the planet.
Does size count at all?
I like them when they're really big.
And I think it's better when they're enormous.
When a freaking celestial breaks out of the Earth's core, Atlantis will feel the devastation no matter where it's located on the map. What is important is how this event introduces Namor and Atlantis to the MCU. And this is the perfect place to set up the Atlantis and Wakanda conflict. So here's how I think it should play out. After the events of the Eternals, Wakanda sends an expedition to investigate Tiamat. When the Wakandans arrive, they encounter hostile Atlanteans. Namor and his people are there to find out what the hell just rose out of the bottom of the ocean and brought devastation to Atlantis. So both people converge in the same place for the first time in thousands of years, and things will get bloody. I think Shuri should be there as the top scientist of Wakanda. She will try to reason with Namor, but Namor's angry, and the Wakandans are in the wrong place in the worst time. So it's Imperious Rex time.
Imperious Rex!
So he attacks the Wakandan expedition. Because of how volatile Namor is, the conflict quickly spirals into a war between the two most powerful super nations on Earth. And since Wakanda is so advanced, Namor must have been preparing for a conflict with them for decades. And the best way to raise the scales is if Atlantis possesses weapons that can oppose vibranium. How badass would it be if Namor's trident can cut through vibranium like Thanos' sword through Cap's shield? That creates escalation for the sequel, where the Black Panther suit is suddenly not as indestructible as it was in the first film. Also, Namor could point the finger at Wakanda for failing to protect the world. Wakanda is advanced, very similar to how Atlantis used to be in ancient times. Yet, the Wakandans hid their gifts from the world for millions of years, in contrast to Atlantis, back when it was the center of the world. Atlantis used to be the perfect utopia before it sank, so there's always going to be the question of how much better would the world have been if Atlantis still ruled the world. So Namor directs his fury at Wakanda, setting an example for the rest of the world. I think that the best direction Marvel can take with Namor is the same one DC sort of took with Orm in Aquaman. Orm had legitimate grief with humanity, blaming them for their crimes against the oceans.
Because for a century, they have polluted our waters and poisoned our children.
The problem there was that the movie didn't dive into those dense themes because Aquaman wanted to stay a mostly fun adventure movie. But with Namor, Marvel can explore the devastating impact humanity has had on the environment. Exploring how climate change and global warming affect Namor and Atlantis is the perfect story. Namor ages very slowly. He's been around for 100 years. So, over the century, he saw this drastic shift in humanity's relationship with the environment and the careless mistreatment of his oceans. Because everything under the ocean belongs to Namor, and from his point of view, every oil drill, every dead fish, every pollution, every melting ice cap is an unforgivable crime against Atlantis. I mean, you know the saying, it's not what the world can do for you, but what you can do for the world. Well, for Namor, it's what you must do for Atlantis. But after what happened with Tiamat, Namor is done playing nice with the surface world. You can't really blame a Celestial on the humans. Well, if someone can, it's going to be Namor.
We have been hiding long enough. The time has come for Atlantis to rise again.
Now, I do have to talk about a very sensitive matter, and that's T'Challa. At this point, we don't know what Marvel's plans for Black Panther are. I really hate to speculate about this, but I assume that T'Challa isn't going to be in Wakanda Forever that much. I'm sure his presence will be felt, but he won't have an active role, meaning someone else will have to take the throne and the Black Panther mantle. And here the story can become even more complicated. When Namor attacks, Wakanda will need strong leadership, otherwise the nation will fall. As the future queen, Shuri will have to deal with this crisis, and she might not be ready for that responsibility.
This corset is really uncomfortable, so could we all just wrap it up and go home?
I mean, she's still pretty young, and she seems to be more into creating new tech instead of actually ruling Wakanda. So that gives us a fascinating arc for Shuri, where she must step into her brother's shoes and deal with Wakanda's biggest crisis. She might try to find a peaceful resolution and attempt to solve things with diplomacy, something that doesn't work with Namor. This will put her at odds with someone like M'Baku, who would react to Namor's rage with his own rage. Also, let's not forget that M'Baku helped T'Challa because it served him. He might not show the same respect to Shuri, saying that Wakanda cannot be led by someone who's so young and inexperienced, and during wartime they need strong leadership. So this war between Wakanda and Atlantis isn't going to be so simple. Shuri won't just deal with Namor's attack, but also the complicated politics of her own nation, and that's really perfect for escalation in the story. But there's also the question of who becomes Black Panther now. I'm not sure that Shuri should be Black Panther.
What?
At least not yet. Wakanda Forever should explore her evolution and growth in a difficult time, as she learns how to lead the nation as well as protect it. Most people will say that Okoye should be Black Panther, and while I agree that would be awesome, I think the best option is Nakia. The first film established Nakia as someone who envisions what Wakanda should be, how it must come out of the shadows and help the rest of the world.
Share what we have. We could provide aid and access to technology and refuge to those who need it.
She refused to stand down when Killmonger took the throne. She was willing to fight even when believing that T'Challa died. She stands for what is right and not what's best for Wakanda, and that makes her the perfect Black Panther after T'Challa. And that's in contrast to Namor, who always does what's best for Atlantis first. So this gives us a fascinating ideological conflict for this movie. What is your responsibility to your nation versus the rest of the world? And how can we all make the world a better place without killing each other? But how do you make Namor chill out? Well, unless Sue Storm's going to show up, we will need a shocking twist.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
What if Atlantis wasn't as extraordinary as the legends say? The shocking truth is that the ancient kingdom wasn't this perfect utopia that helped the world and advanced humanity. In reality, Atlantis enslaved the rest of the world with its advanced tech and weapons. It ruled with violence and fear, wiping out whole civilizations who dared stand in its way.
You didn't see that coming?
When Atlantis sank, it wasn't a tragedy for the rest of the world. It was a cause for celebration, a liberation from an oppressive empire. Namor and his people believed in this lie for thousands of years, glorifying their alleged greatness, believing that they would have done better. And that's something either Shuri or Nakia will discover when entering the spirit realm, learning the truth from the kings of Wakanda who ruled during Atlantis' time. And once Namor discovers that he believed in a terrible lie, that will be the reason why he stops the war, understanding that his actions could lead to Atlantis becoming that oppressive empire once again.
That's the coolest story I've ever heard in my entire life. That's insane.
So in the end, Namor will vow to do better. But because it's still Namor, he's not going to do a full 180 and suddenly become the ultimate good guy. But it doesn't mean that he can't find a better way to protect his kingdom and help the world.
Imperious Rex!
For him, Atlantis will always come first, and humanity's crimes will never be forgotten. And he'll always bounce between the heroes and the villains. And that's just a delicious recipe for a great anti-hero. So in the future, he could fight alongside the Avengers, but he could also team up with Dr. Doom and try to conquer the world simply because he believes the world would be a better place under his rule. Speaking of Dr. Doom, I wouldn't be too surprised if he's involved in Wakanda Forever in some capacity. It's the perfect opportunity to introduce him to the MCU.
I agree.
But look, don't get me started on Dr. Doom, because this video might end up being 3 hours long. So staying on Namor, I think that having the events of the Eternals establish Namor and Atlantis in this way will be good for Wakanda Forever and the MCU. An event like that must have everlasting consequences. And the reveal of Atlantis, the war with Wakanda, and the introduction of Namor is a great payoff for all of that. So what do you think? Could this theory work? Who should be Black Panther, Shuri or someone else? Let me know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy.